most insane, unsolved mysteries. And it's a nice 30-minute video. So I'm gonna see if a genius like me can solve it. Should be pretty easy. So let's
Mystery
just do it.
plagues, ghost ships, and people vanishing without a trace. These are just a few of the mind-blowing tales we're uncovering in today's episode of The Infographics Show. The
Alright.
most insane unsolved mysteries. Number
Let's do it.
15. The ghost ship of the Mary Celeste. On the 5th of December 1872, the vast Atlantic stretched endlessly before the British ship Dei Gratia. Then something caught the crew's eyes. The ghostly vessel drifting aimlessly 400 nautical miles east of the Azores. The ship was the Mary
It's
Celeste.
drifting.
It had set sail from New York on the 7th of November, destined for Genoa, Italy, carrying Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, his wife, their young daughter, and 7 experienced crew members. Yet
So they were
something
actually
inexplicable
there.
happened. None of them would ever be seen again.
Oh.
The captain of Dei Gratia, David Morehouse, ordered a boarding party to investigate the drifting vessel. What they found would baffle the world. The Mary Celeste showed no signs of a struggle, no chaos, no damage, nothing to explain the emptiness that had greeted them. The ship was eerily intact, but instead of its crew and passengers, it carried only silence and mystery. The last entry on the ship's log was at 5 a.m. on November 25th.
We're in high spirits.
Meaning the Mary Celeste
Okay.
had been floating aimlessly for almost 10 days by the time it was discovered. It still had 6 months of supplies in good condition. The sailors found the ship's lifeboat was missing, and they wondered if the Mary Celeste was defective in some way, which
Huh. So far you're saying it seems like this crew disappeared, right?
would have caused the crew to abandon ship. A quick search revealed the ship had taken on 3.5 feet of water at its very bottom, and one
Okay, so
of
maybe
its
they
2
got
pumps was
stormed.
disassembled. Despite this, the Mary Celeste was just as seaworthy as ever. In fact, the ship's abandonment was so perplexing that suspicion fell on the wrong people. When the Dei Gratia's crew sailed the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar to claim payment for salvaging the ship, the Attorney General started an investigation against them. It was believed they might have played a sinister role in the disappearance of the Mary Celeste's crew. So
Ooh,
what
good
happened?
point.
One theory suggests that the Mary Celeste faced relentless storms, with towering waves and howling winds battering the ship. To make
That's what
matters
I
worse,
thought of.
Captain Briggs was relying on a faulty chronometer, leading him to misjudge their location in the Atlantic. Believing the vessel had taken on too much water during the storms, Briggs tried to assess the damage, but the ship's pumps, critical for determining water levels, were useless, clogged with coal dust and debris from a previous voyage. No seasoned captain would ever abandon a seaworthy ship in open water, but Captain Briggs might have thought the Mary Celeste was on the brink of sinking, and salvation was only a few miles away, so Briggs may have ordered the crew into the lifeboat, aiming to reach the safety of the land ahead of them. But instead of finding a bustling harbor, they may have encountered yet another brutal storm, or a deserted island with no hope of survival. But this ghost ship is far from the
It wouldn't be an island, because they would have ended up being found later on.
strangest thing anyone has ever found in the sea. Number 14. The Antique is far
Okay,
from the
so that's the end of
strangest
the
thing
theory.
anyone has ever found in the sea. Number
So before we go to the next one, it does just sound like, yeah, there was some storms, which is what I guessed. And basically, they got cold feet and abandoned ship when they didn't need it. Simple as that.
14. The Antikythera mechanism. That prize might go to the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered by
Sorry?
sponge divers near Antikythera Island in 1901, the mechanism
Okay.
is thought to be the creation of ancient Greeks. But why is it so shocking that a civilization renowned for advancing geometry, mathematics, and astronomy could create such technology? Because the Antikythera mechanism is far ahead of its time, a device so advanced that it's essentially the world's first known analog computer, built around 100 BC. The technology that could make such a mechanism possible wouldn't be developed for millennia. In fact, the closest relatives of this type of mechanism are medieval cathedral clocks, built at least 1,000 years after the Antikythera mechanism. Made out of a bronze sheet, the machine has the first ever known set of scientific dials. It also had at least 30 gear wheels, although they're mostly fragments now. There's also a
Okay.
large dial for the sun and the moon in the zodiac, a ball for lunar phases, and 2 large dials
So
tracking
it
other
was like a
astronomical
clock.
cycles. The machine used very sophisticated technology, including both a slot and pin mechanism to account for subtle changes in the moon's motion, and epicyclic gearing, the same tech used in car transmissions. Due to the inscriptions, archaeologists confirmed it was Greek in origin, and one of the dials in the back was tuned to a 4-year cycle and kept track of the different Pan-Hellenic games. Some historians suspect the inventor behind the Antikythera machine is Archimedes, the ancient Greek Neil deGrasse Tyson. One of the premier scientists at the time, Archimedes was ahead of most of his colleagues by, well, a century if he truly is the inventor of the mechanism. This machine is mysterious not only because of the technology required to
Pretty
build
cool
it,
machine.
but also because of the knowledge of astronomy and the universe it would have needed. Scientists believe the Antikythera mechanism predicted astronomical events like solar eclipses, something thought to be beyond the knowledge of even the most advanced
Wow.
ancient Greeks. The other puzzling part of this machine is, why is it the only one? If ancient Greeks had much more advanced tech than historians
Well,
previously believed.
It's as simple as it was just testing out his new thing. It's easy.
Why is this the only machine in which it's been found? We will never really know for sure. As it turns out, we don't even know a lot about today's big tech.
They were
But more on
probably
that
just
later.
testing
Number
it out.
13. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Disappearances. In 1899, 4 lighthouse keepers were given a thankless job to man the lighthouse on Eilean Moor and hopefully stop ships from smashing onto the rocky Outer Hebrides of Western Scotland. Only 3 men would be present at the lighthouse at any given time, with a 4th taking 2 weeks to go home and remember what his family looked like before leaving civilization again. On December 26, 1900, a ship captain reported no sign of life from the lighthouse. There was no response to the horn being sounded or a rocket fired from the ship. Relief keeper Joseph Moore was sent to investigate. When he got on shore, he was stunned to discover that all 3 keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, had
Missing.
disappeared. 2 of the 3 oilskin coats that normally hung in the entranceway were missing. There was half-eaten food on the table, and a chair had been overturned. The last entry in the logbook was December 13th, with the last weather recordings being written down at 9 a.m. on December 15th. Since they were never transferred to the log, Moore believed the men must have disappeared during the afternoon of the 15th. The men couldn't have run away, as there was literally no way to leave the island until the supply ship came by. Foul play was briefly suspected but also dismissed. A crime would have left a body behind, unless all 3 men turned on each other and somehow managed to throw each other's bodies into the sea. Unlikely. One theory stands out above the rest. The men were washed away by the waves. Signs of recent stormy weather, like dislodged rocks, were all over the island. Some believe that 2 of the men went out to repair damage or secure loose equipment, only to be caught off guard by a powerful rogue wave. In an instant, they might have been swept into the sea.
And then the
man
third
left
one tries
inside,
to
either hearing
save.
the commotion or being called out by a survivor, ran out without putting on his coat and gear, and was also swept away.
Yeah.
The lighthouse sits on a 200-foot cliff high above the ocean below. That should have offered
That
it some
is
protection,
cool.
but the island was often hit by intense winds and giant waves. In fact, just a month after the lighthouse was first lit, waves actually reached all the way up to its height. These massive, powerful waves are called large rollers, and one of
Whoa.
them could have slammed into the tiny island with unstoppable force. When Moore returned, he found that a box containing crane...
But if waves were going that high, hitting this lighthouse, shouldn't there be some visible damage in the lighthouse? Now this is confusing.
Handles,
me.
mooring, and landing ropes stored 110 feet above sea level had been completely washed away during his absence. It seemed like more proof pointing to the rogue wave theory. Number 12. The disappearance.
I mean, it makes the most sense. I don't know. I don't think the waves got quite that high. But yeah.
Appearance of Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart was an incredibly
Isn't that the plane person?
accomplished woman. In an era where female pilots were a rarity, she shattered multiple records in the relatively new field of aviation and became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1937, she decided she would fly around the world. Amelia would pilot a
Sweet.
twin-engine Lockheed Electra plane over the course of a month and take multiple fuel stops around the world. On the 1st of July, Amelia Earhart took off from Oakland, California, heading eastward on her ambitious journey. Nearly a month later, she had already traveled 22,000 miles, reaching Lae, New Guinea, just 7,000 miles shy of her goal. One of the final refueling stops, Howland Island, a tiny speck of land in the vast Pacific, lay 2,500 miles ahead. But as Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan departed over the open ocean, something went terribly, terribly wrong. The pair never reached Howland Island. In fact, they were never heard from again. Aviation experts theorized Earhart's plane ran out of fuel, caused by a combination of bad flying weather and adverse winds. It was also thought that Earhart had left her last destination with less than a full load of gas in order to make the plane lighter. What followed was the most expensive search and rescue mission in history at the time. Crews scoured the Pacific, desperately seeking any trace of Earhart and Noonan. But despite their efforts, the two aviators were never found. Nearly 2 years later, on the 5th of January 1939, Amelia Earhart was officially declared dead. Some people believe she and Noonan might have made it to an uninhabited island close to their destination where they crash-landed and eventually died from a lack of resources. The search and rescue mission may have missed them, as the Pacific is absolutely enormous and mostly made up of endless ocean. Others allege that Earhart was secretly a U.S. spy sent over the Pacific to spy on the Japanese. Claims of Earhart photographed in random locations across Asia and the Pacific years after her supposed death have mostly been disproven. But no one really knows what happened to her. She's far from
You can't just go into hiding when you're that famous.
the only person whose disappearance has been hotly debated for years.
And there's no way they would have hit her island, because especially now, like some sort of wreckage. Yeah. Well, there would have been, I don't know, I feel like they would have just had to go into the ocean.
Number 11.
Maybe like it was lack of fuel or a defect on the plane, but whatever it was, it has.
The story of D.B. Cooper. On the 24th of November, 1971, a man boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. After lighting a cigarette on board, the 70s were a very different time, he handed a flight attendant a note that said, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit next to me." The man demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000 upon arrival at Seattle's SeaTac Airport. The pilot circled the airport for 3.5 tense hours as ground staff rushed to gather $200,000 in cash and a set of parachutes. When the plane finally touched down, the hijacker, calling himself D.B. Cooper, collected his ransom and released all the passengers along with 2 crew members. His next demand was a flight to Mexico, but shortly after takeoff, Cooper had other plans. He strapped on a parachute, lowered the plane's rear stairs, and leapt out into the night, vanishing into history. This was one of the
nobody's gonna find him like that.
first hijacking cases ever recorded on an airplane, though not the only still unsolved incident of terrorism in this episode. And D.B. Cooper made headlines. The FBI looked at over 800 suspects to try to identify the culprit, but the description of white man, dark hair, dark eyes, medium build was too generic to help. At least the flight attendant helped the Bureau make a sketch. One strong suspect was Richard McCoy Jr. Just 5 months after Cooper's daring hijack, McCoy pulled off a strikingly similar crime, hijacking a plane, demanding $500,000 and a parachute, and then leaping off into the skies. The parallels were almost too perfect to ignore. McCoy was eventually caught and sentenced to 45 years for air piracy. But his story didn't end there. He escaped prison, hijacked a garbage truck, and just 3 months later was shot and killed by FBI agents. Decades later, McCoy's own children came forward, claiming they strongly believed their father was none other than D.B. Cooper. But a lot of people doubted that Cooper even survived the initial jump. He leapt out into a thunderstorm over a heavily forested area with almost no visibility. Not to mention, in 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram found a rotting pack of around $5,800 on the banks of the Columbia River while building a campfire. The FBI later traced it to some of the bills given to D.B. Cooper. If Cooper had survived, would he have not taken the money? Yet others believe that since no one found a body, he did survive his fall. No one really knows, just like no one knows what really goes on at number 10.
My opinion would be there's no way he would have survived. To find, what was it, nearly 5,000, quite a big chunk of money. and just rotting as well. See, if it was like half burnt or something, you know, used as like fuel at a campfire, just rotting on the ground.
Area 51. Almost
Ooh.
everyone has heard of Area 51,
Area
but few people know
51.
what the government actually uses it for. The mystery started in the late 1980s when Robert Lazar gave an interview saying that he worked around Area 51 for years to reverse engineer alien spaceships. Lazar's account was called into question.
He just straight up said he worked on alien spaceships.
To reverse engineer alien spaceships.
Wow.
Lazar's account was called into question when the channel discovered that he lied about a number of things, like graduating from MIT, Caltech, and working at Los Alamos National
We've all been there.
Laboratory. Essentially, most of his resume was a lie. To make matters worse, it also came out that he had ties to a high-tech prostitution ring, further damaging his credibility. Still, rumors about Area 51 refused to die down. One of the most persistent claimed that the wreckage from the infamous Roswell incident, a supposed UFO crash, had been secretly transported to the base for study. The government fueled the rumors by doing what it does best, acting super secretive and weird about the whole thing. In fact, until 2013, the government didn't even acknowledge Area 51's existence, stating that the land is just a part of the Nevada Test and Training Range on Edwards Air Force Base. They were forced to reveal the truth after a CIA document discussing the development of the U-2 spy plane was declassified, revealing Area 51, at least partly, as a flight testing and Air Force development site. To this day, it's hard to get a good idea what goes on at Area 51, as the U.S. military has emphasized that it has good reason for keeping its activities secret that have nothing to do with aliens. The area is heavily guarded, with warning signs, motion sensors, and armed patrols scattered throughout. To make it even clearer, the authorities have openly stated that deadly force is authorized against trespassers, enough to keep most curious onlookers far, far away. On the one hand, it makes sense that the U.S. military doesn't want to make its secrets, technology, and operations public knowledge. On the other hand, could they be hiding something else as well? But how can we figure out the mysteries of extraterrestrial civilizations when it turns out we don't even know much about our own? Number 9. The Bronze Age Collapse. The Bronze Age wasn't as primitive as many people think. Some of history's most iconic civilizations thrived during this era: Babylonians and Sumerians in Mesopotamia, ancient Egyptians along the Nile, Minoans and Mycenaeans in Greece, and the Hittites in what's now Turkey. This thriving region spanned from modern-day Italy to Afghanistan, and from Turkey in the north to Egypt in the south. It was a world of interconnected cultures, bustling trade routes, and remarkable advancements. And then one day, or more specifically around 1177 BC, all of these magnificent, glorious civilizations collapsed. Well, most of them anyway. Egypt made it through. But how did so many advanced civilizations in different parts of the world fall at the same time? Some historical accounts of the era blame the Sea Peoples. No one is really sure where these mysterious people were actually from, just that they showed up to many Bronze Age cities and they laid waste to them. The king of Canaan wrote about them burning his cities to the ground as people who did evil things in my country. But these were not just armies who burned cities and laid siege, they brought an entire community with them. Reports of the Sea Peoples describe them arriving in ports with women and children in tow, suggesting they might have also been fleeing from other locations, likely from the Western Mediterranean. Why would they be fleeing? In 2014, researchers analyzed samples from the Sea of Galilee and discovered that the period between 1250 and 1100 BC was one of the driest in history. This massive drought lasted anywhere from 150 to nearly 300 years, depending on the region, a catastrophic climate event for the ancient world. That might explain not only the plundering, murderous rampages of the Sea Peoples, desperate for resources, but also the collapse of the Bronze Age kingdoms. Notably, Egypt and Babylon, who managed to survive to some extent, were built along the Nile and Euphrates rivers, making them less vulnerable to the devastating droughts. But the mystery of exactly what happened and who the Sea Peoples even were may never be solved. Number 8. The Voynich Manuscript.
I don't think that's that weird. If they said they were burned, this means they got raided. Question is, raided by who? And then the 2014 discovery
often
revealed
called
that, so.
The most mysterious manuscript in the world, the Voynich manuscript remains one of history's greatest unsolved riddles. This vellum book, over 230 pages long, appears to cover topics like herbology and astrology. We say appears because it's written in a language no one has ever been able to decode. Historians have guessed
Wow.
at its contents thanks to the many illustrations found on the pages. These include plants, planets, baths, and naked women, in one of the most incredibly random assortments of topics ever seen in a single book. The strange thing is, the Voynich manuscript is a medieval European text. It should be written in a recognizable language, especially since
But
no
it's not.
untranslated languages are known to exist from that region and time. The manuscript resurfaced in the modern world after rare book dealer Wilfrid Voynich bought it in 1912 from a Jesuit collection in Italy. Today, it's in Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, causing nervous breakdowns in a new generation of PhD students trying to understand it. Some scholars have theorized that the manuscript might be written in a secret code, but for what purpose? And why did 38,000 words about presumably astronomy and plants and naked women need to be written in a completely undecipherable code anyway? Others think it's a fake and that Voynich himself made it up to make money off a resale of the manuscript. But no evidence has been found to support that theory. Using radiocarbon dating, researchers at the University of Arizona determined that the vellum pages of the Voynich manuscript date back to between 1404 and 1438. Even more intriguing, historians note that the writing itself appears consistent with the age of the vellum. Nothing about it seems out of place. Scholars believe they're close to an answer regarding the origin of the Voynich manuscript every few years or so, and then someone disproves their theory. So the mystery remains, much like number 7, the Wall Street bombing of 1920.
Oh,
One
this
of
is a
history's
fun
most
one.
infamous terrorist attacks is one you may have never heard of, the Wall Street bombing of 1920. Seems like people
Alright.
were mad at the financial industry even all the way back then. Around noon on the 16th of
Even now,
September,
eh?
a man guided a horse-drawn cart through Wall Street just as the lunch hour was beginning. He stopped between the USSA office and the JP Morgan building, climbed down, and then disappeared into the growing crowd of workers heading to nearby lunch counters. Moments later, a deafening explosion shattered the midday bustle. Shrapnel and metal fragments tore through the crowded streets, instantly killing over 30 people and injuring 300 more in the chaos of this packed neighborhood.
Wow.
As people
That
were
wasn't a
dragged
very
away for
good-
medical treatment, more of
That's not a very good KD. Left over 300 injured, but only
more in the
expect a bit better.
chaos of this packed neighborhood. As people were dragged away for medical treatment, more of the injured victims succumbed to their injuries, bringing the death toll to at least 38. By the very next day, Wall Street had thrown tarps over shattered windows and gotten back to work. Some employees, still bandaged from their injuries, even returned to their desks. But the burning question remained: who was behind this heinous act? Multiple
Nobody
U.S.
knows.
government departments started an investigation, including the Bureau of Investigation, the prototype of the FBI, the Secret Service, and the NYPD and Fire Department. Hundreds of people were interviewed, but no one could give a detailed description of either the driver or his wagon. When the NYPD attempted to reconstruct the bomb, they hoped it might offer clues to narrow down their suspect list. Instead, they found it was built from ordinary, easily accessible materials, things almost anyone could get their hands on. The
Wow.
Bureau only had one lead, a series of flyers that had appeared in the area in the previous weeks demanding the release of political prisoners, signed by the American Anarchist Fighters. A group called the Italian Anarchists, led by Luigi Galliani, had also put up similar letters in the past before carrying out 2 different public bombings. The Bureau investigated every lead they could, but turned up nothing. Didn't help that the prime suspect, Galliani, fled the country and seemed unwilling to return for questioning. So, who actually bombed Wall Street that fateful day in 1920? Nobody knows, just like no one knows number
That's fair.
6,
I
the
got no
identity
clue.
of the Zodiac Killer. How is it possible that one of America's most high-profile serial
Zodiac
killers
Killer.
has never been caught? Anyone interested in true crime or with an active Netflix subscription has heard of the Zodiac Killer. In the late 1960s, he terrorized the California Bay Area, ambushing young couples on romantic nights out in isolated areas and killing his
Bro was mad. Bro was mad.
victims. Though he is linked to 5 murders, in his own letters he's claimed to be responsible for up to 37 deaths. The Zodiac killing spree began on the 20th of December 1968 with the murders of 17-year-old David Arthur Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, who was just 16 years old. Months later, on August 1, 1969, the killer broke his silence. In the letter sent to 3 different newspapers, he chillingly confessed, "Dear editor, "I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman." To prove it, he included details about the crime that had never been made public. Furthermore, the Zodiac demanded that the newspapers print his letter on the front page, otherwise he would kill more people. These letters contained a cipher that would get the public even more invested in the story, with readers trying to crack the code. 8 days later, 2 readers cracked the cipher. Its opening line was haunting: "I like killing people because it is so much fun." This chilling message wasn't just a confession, it was a grim prelude of what was to come. The Zodiac followed up with another letter, this time containing cipher Z340. Unlike the first, it would remain unsolved for over 50 years, until the 5th of December 2020. Despite the
Wow,
police
very
chasing
recent.
countless leads, 2 surviving victims, Michael Renal Majot and Brian Calvin Hartnell, and detailed police sketches, the Zodiac Killer was never caught. Old California is apparently a magnet for unsolved murders because it's also the location of our next mystery. Number 5. The Black Dahlia. On the 5th of January 1947, a woman and her son were running errands in the Leimert Park neighborhood of Los Angeles when they stumbled upon something horrifying: a dead body lying in a vacant lot. The victim, a young woman, had been gruesomely sliced in half at the waist, her body drained of blood. To the stunned mother and her son, it looked like a discarded mannequin. That was until they realized what they were looking at. They called the police, who quickly identified the body as that of Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old waitress and aspiring actress. The media nicknamed her the Black Dahlia, a reference to the dark clothes she was frequently pictured wearing, and the 1946 movie Blue Dahlia. An autopsy confirmed that she had died of shock and cerebral hemorrhage after being tied up and tortured. The murder of the Black Dahlia made headlines across the country as the tragic murder of a young potential starlet, not to mention the exceptional gruesome manner of her death, scandalized the nation. Police went through a wide range of suspects, including ex-boyfriends, acquaintances, and over 75 contacts from her address book, to no avail. Then someone sent a package to the Los Angeles Examiner containing personal photos of Short, as well as her birth certificate and social security card. Among the items found with the papers, one stood out: a small address book embossed with the name Mark Hansen. Hansen, a local nightclub and theater owner, quickly became a suspect in the case. Police also turned their attention to others, including Leslie Duane Dillon, a bellhop and former mortician's assistant, whose background raised even more questions. Dillon was considered the more serious suspect. Police believed him and Hansen to be part of a circle of hotel robbers, and Short had become aware of their burglary ring. Another suspect, suggested by not only the LAPD but also his own children, was a local doctor, George Hodel. Police suspected the killer had medical knowledge, as the precise cuts on Elizabeth Short's body seemed to require surgical skill. Hodel was a rich physician who moved in celebrity circles. He was also accused of sexual assault by his own daughter, Tamar. Considering everyone involved is now dead, we will never know if either of these men killed Elizabeth Short. Many people believe that the LAPD might have helped cover up the killings, as they had links to both prime suspects. From unsolved murders to mysterious diseases. Number 4. English sweating sickness. Life in medieval Europe wasn't exactly easy. Most people lived short, harsh lives as serfs, and every so often a plague would sweep through and decimate entire communities. While the bubonic plague is infamous, another deadly disease, nicknamed the English sweating sickness, began terrorizing the populations in the 15th and 16th centuries. And to this day, no one knows what it was. The first cases of this mystery disease occurred in 1485, after Henry Tudor returned to London with his forces after having won a historic battle. A few of the men were suddenly struck down with strange symptoms. The affected people would start feeling apprehensive, and then a sense of horror, and then they would get headaches, shivers, and body pains, and sometimes giddiness. Within a couple of hours, patients would start sweating profusely. They became delirious, incredibly thirsty, hot, and developed a rapid heart rate. Eventually, after hours of sweating, apprehension, hurting, and shivering, they understandably felt the urge to go to sleep. Unfortunately, many of them would never wake up. According to reports, the disease had a high fatality rate. Most of those who died lost their lives within 24 hours of the initial symptoms. If you survived that first day, chances are you would be fine. Doctors of the time were baffled by the mysterious English sweating sickness.
Like,
With
all
their
you have to
limited
do
medical
is not
knowledge, they
sleep.
couldn't pinpoint its cause. The disease would sweep through a population in just a week or two and then vanish for years, only to resurface during the summer and the fall. Even stranger, it seemed to target wealthier men, particularly clergy, more than anyone else. English sweating sickness would return around 5 times, with the last outbreak happening in 1551 during the reign of Edward VI, and then it just disappeared. But what was it? Some modern doctors studying the historic infection believe it may have been a type of hantavirus spread by rats, which would
Okay.
explain why it affected priests and the wealthy. At that time, rats were actually more likely to be found in wealthy households. Rich people had huge kitchens and lots of food and grain in storage. Monasteries and churches also had a lot of stored food. It's believed that rat droppings spread the virus through the air. But honestly, no one really knows, just like no one knows the origin of. Number 3. The
That was a
Nazca
pretty good
Lines.
theory.
About 200 miles southeast of Lima, on the arid coastal plains near the town of Nazca, lies one of history's greatest enigmas,
Is that
the
an ant?
Nazca Lines. Between 1 and 500 AD, the Nazca people of Peru etched enormous lines into the desert floor, creating
Yeah.
intricate designs of animals, plants, and even mythical figures like the astronaut.
Astronaut. You're
Creating
telling
intricate
me
designs
that's
of
an
animals,
astronaut.
plants, and even mythical figures like the astronaut.
How is that an astronaut? Looks more like an alien.
Despite their enormous size, the sketches are almost invisible from ground level. It wasn't until the 1930s, when planes soared over the area, that their full scale and breathtaking detail were revealed from above. People designed the lines by digging 12 to 15 inches down and unearthing lighter sand that etched a design into the desert. Some of the straight lines run up to 30 miles long with scientific precision. The shapes, known as biomorph, can stretch up to 1,200 feet long, roughly
Wow.
the height of the Empire State Building. To
How
this
do they
day,
stay
archaeologists
like
can't
that?
understand how and why so much effort was undertaken to create these massive designs that are only visible from the sky. Adding to the mystery is the biomorph known
For the aliens. I knew it. It's not astronauts, it's aliens. They were making signs for the aliens when they invade.
as the astronaut, which resembles an alien or a spaceman. This has led some
What
to
did I
speculate that
say?
the Nazca people might have been influenced by extraterrestrial visitors. Some experts have theorized that the lines are astronomical in nature, meant to reflect constellations in the sky. Others think they might have ritual significance. The fact that they've lasted to this day is a testament both to how
Yeah,
well they're made
I don't know
and to the
how
complete lack
they've
of moisture in the
lasted.
area, as the Nazca region gets less than an inch of rainfall per year.
Yeah, but
were
what
the
about
Nazca
the
lines for?
wind?
Why was something so advanced made for seemingly no reason at all, if it could only be seen from miles above where no one could go at the time? No one knows, just like no one knows the answer to our next mystery. It's a mystery you may not
Let's
even
hear it.
know exists. Number 2. The identity of Bitcoin founder Satoshi Nakamoto. You have undoubtedly heard of Bitcoin by now. As the
Yeah.
first and most famous cryptocurrency, it quickly shot to fame by skyrocketing in value and making its early adopters a fortune. Then, just as dramatically, it crashed and rose again and crashed again, and it's been a wild ride ever since. You may wonder how Bitcoin came into the world to begin with. The answer lies in its founder, Satoshi Nakamoto. Except, no one knows who he is. Satoshi Nakamoto isn't even a real name. It's a pseudonym used by whoever the creator of the world's first cryptocurrency is. The mysterious creator of Bitcoin first signed their name on the Bitcoin white paper in 2008, laying out the original blueprint for how the cryptocurrency would work. In March 2014, Newsweek claimed to have uncovered the true identity of Bitcoin's founder, a Caltech graduate named Dorian Nakamoto, who had spent years working on defense projects. However, Dorian strongly denied the article's claim. Plus, if you want to hide your identity, it seems strange to create a pseudonym with the same last name.
Yeah.
Another man, Australian Craig Wright, has suggested to several people that he is Bitcoin's founder. Wired magazine even did a profile on him, seemingly concluding that they had found the cryptocurrency founder at last. Yet, when they fact-checked their article, they realized Wright's stories had a lot of inconsistencies. Regardless, Wright continued insinuating that he was the real Satoshi Nakamoto and used the attention to create Bitcoin SV within the cryptocurrency community.
Classic.
That was until in 2024, London High Court Judge James Mellor officially ruled that Wright could not be Satoshi Nakamoto. So, who is the elusive crypto creator? How can the person behind a world-changing technology remain anonymous for so long? Whoever they are, some people actually believe Satoshi is more than one person. It's believed they have around 1.1 million bitcoins to their name. and they are directly involved in a billion-dollar industry without anyone knowing a thing about their true identity.
The crazy thing is, surely you'd be able to see like a difference in this person's style, you know? Surely. Unless it does go to that theory where it is just multiple people. Like, the Satoshi, whatever the name was, is like the group of people. That way it's less obvious. And even when they're questioned, it's easier to lie. Because it's like, no, I'm not. You ask more specifically, I'm part of it, but I'm not that.
At least this mystery is still unearthed. Our number one mystery may be, quite literally, out of this world. Number 1. The Phoenix Lights. On the 13th of March 1997, people in Phoenix, Arizona were enjoying a clear, moonless night when something
spooky.
strange happened. A series of lights appeared in the sky. One group of lights appeared between 7:55 p.m. and 8:40 p.m. in a V shape that moved across the sky in formation like a flock of birds. An hour later, between 9:15 p.m. and 9:35 p.m., another group of lights was spotted, a straight line that could be made out over the Sierra Estrella mountain range. Thousands and thousands of people across central and southern Arizona, with no connection to each other, saw the lights. In fact, one Rocky Mountain poll conducted in 1997 estimates that up to 10% of the entire state's population saw the phenomenon. Among the witnesses were some surprising names. Arizona Governor Fife Symington initially joked about the sighting, but admitted over a decade later that he had seen it too. At the time, he stayed quiet to avoid drawing attention. He was dealing with a federal indictment. Then there's actor Kurt Russell, who was flying into Phoenix International Airport when the lights first appeared and even reported them to air traffic control. It's hard to dismiss that many simultaneous unconnected accounts as misunderstandings or imagination. So what did people see? One explanation is that Phoenix residents witnessed a top-secret military operation. The V-shape might have been a group of A-10 Thunderbolt jets flying out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson as part of a pilot training program, Operation Snowbird. One young Arizona astronomer, Mitch Stanley, supported this idea, as he said he used a Dobsonian mirrored telescope to take a closer look at the lights and saw a group of fighter planes. The second group of lights was believed to be parachute-equipped flares being dropped from a second group of jets. Others say this theory has been spread by the U.S. military itself to cover up the most likely explanation, a legitimate UFO sighting. Phoenix City Councilwoman Frances Emma Barwood attempted to launch an investigation into the mysterious
I'm not
lights.
sure.
However, her efforts were met with public ridicule, especially after she suggested aliens might be involved. The backlash was so severe that she ultimately lost her seat. To this day, alien skeptics and believers disagree about the true cause of the Phoenix Lights. Which of these mysteries surprised you the most? Do you think you could solve any of them? Let us know in the comments below.
I mean, the thing is, it's so hard to say what it was without any proof. Be simple. Shooting stars, or planes, or aliens. Like, it could literally be anything. Right. Literally anything. And only 10%. I don't think that's that good. 10% of people. If there was like these big flashy like U lights, surely more people would have seen it, right?